Swag is the courage and confidence to unapologetically and authentically be who you are. And I really believe that not only you, but the world benefits when we own who we are, because we give permission for other people to do the same.
Welcome to the Confident Podcast. I am Lisa Tarkington, your host of this podcast. If you found yourself hitting play on this podcast, it means it was meant for you. My goal is to help empower and guide you to become a better version of yourself through conversation, advice, and tips that are real, vulnerable, and authentic. I am excited to have you join this journey with me. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Confident Podcast. I am your host, Lisa Tarkington, and it feels so good to be in this seat talking about all things confidence, leadership, and anything to really help you grow as an individual, either that's personally or professionally. Every week, we have amazing conversations, I'm going to say, because sometimes I feel like I'm just talking to good old friends. I have amazing guests on here, and we have awesome topics. And this week, I'm really excited about this conversation because it's stuff that I'm going to be learning about too. And it's all about owning your swag. So it's all about teaching us to have courage and confidence and be unapologetically who we are, which is so powerful. And it's really about how do you do all of those things to grow in your career and grow as a person. But I am not going to be doing this alone. I'm going to be doing this with Mimi Brown, which I'm going to bring her on in a second to introduce herself. But I always love to give the backstory on if I know the person and why I wanted them on the podcast. So I'm going to take you guys all back to 2016. I don't even think Mimi knows this. So 2016, I attended a conference and I was helping out. I was just kind of behind the scenes doing things, and Mimi was there. And she spoke, and I remember being like, who is this girl? How did they get her? And I knew nothing about this woman at this time. Fast forward years. I mean, it's 2024 now, so we're talking 8 years. I have watched this woman soar in more ways than not. And her energy, her inspiration, how she's willing to help people. And I mean, woman to woman, like who cannot do any better than having people empower you and help you grow. And so when we thought about guests to bring on this podcast to talk about things that we teach on a daily basis, we knew we needed to bring her on to share her wisdom with all of you, because I know I'm going to learn a lot, but I know all of you are. So Mimi, welcome to the Confident Podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I did not know that story about 2016. That was like a
Crazy.
lifetime ago.
Yeah. So take us back to tell us your story. So it's been probably a whirlwind of where you were to where you are now. So if you don't mind, just kind of give us the run through so that the audience can know a little bit more about you.
So when I first experienced the bug of being a keynote speaker, I was 19 years old running camera for my college TV station. And there was this mesmerizing speaker. And at that time, they did these things called simulcast. So they would record it and throw it all across campus. And I'm watching him and I'm so mesmerized that I dropped the camera. And after I got done getting yelled at and fired, I walked up to him and I said, oh my God, this is what I want to do. And I've been speaking all my life. I started in high school and competed in oratory contests. May I have your autograph? It was a total fangirl moment. And he said, no. And I said, he said, I want your autograph because you're going to do this one day. And I really believe that we have those intersections in life where people plant seeds in us and they start to grow later on. And so fast forward many years later, I was well into my career and I was told by a colleague of mine that I needed to go to the National Speakers Association. And I walked through my first meeting in 2011 and someone looked at me and said, welcome home. And I knew I had been in the right place. And so because of joining the National Speakers Association, it got me the trajectory to be where I am today. And when we saw each other in 2016, I had been in my career for a little bit at that point. But I owe all of that success to that person who sowed that seed in me when I was just 19 years old.
Isn't that fascinating? The things that we remember from years prior and those little seeds. And guess what? It was free to give you that advice to do that, right? And I mean that we always think oh, I can't make an impact or oh, this or oh, that. But it's how powerful was that? And now look at all the seeds that you've been able to plant because of what you do.
Well, absolutely. And Lisa, I will also say you never know the impact that you have on people just
Mm.
being who you are and showing up authentically. And when I was 19, Joe Martin, who I actually reached out to not too long ago, I shared with him, oh, all because of you from one interaction. And then you shared that same ripple effect that I made just meeting you. And I always say this to people, I'm sure we met. Please remind me of your name again, because I
Yes.
don't remember the interaction, but you remember how people made you feel.
Yes, 100%. And so, one of the things that I know that you talk about is owning your own swag. So, when you think about that, and like, I'd love to know when you tell people, I need you to own your swag personally and professionally, what does that even mean?
Yeah, so swag is short. It's like a hip hop colloquialism for swagger. And swagger is the way that we walk, how we talk, how we carry ourselves. You would see someone and say, "Ooh, they got swagger."
Mm.
And in hip hop terms, they've now changed it to swag. And it's the same concept, but I learned about really what I consider my definition of it when I had my coaching client, Angela. So there I was in my office. Angela had a really rough day. She came in, she was really downtrodden, and she was challenged with, she had all the competence, all of the degrees. She had more letters behind her name than a triple word score in Scrabble, but she could not seem to make it in her career. And so after she started running down everything, I was stumped. And I go, she's doing all of the right things, but she can't make it to that next level. And so I'm in my car and I turn on the radio, and the answer popped out in the form of song. And it was a song by the artist Soulja Boy. And if you're not familiar, he has a song that says, "Turn on My Swag" is the title of it. And the chorus says, "I hopped out the bed and I turned my swag on." And I took that to mean that in order for you to turn something on, that means you already have to possess it. So how do you do that? And so then I define, as I started doing more research about like confidence and personal branding, is how you're owning your swag. Swag is the courage and confidence to unapologetically and authentically be who you are. And as I went back and I coached Angela, she did just that. Like, she really owned who she was. She showed up authentically. She did the work. And I walk people through the process of owning your swag. And one of the things that Angela did is she got clear on where she wanted to go, who she wanted to be, and who she needed to show up as in order to make it to that next level. And a miraculous thing came as Angela started stepping into who she was, owning herself authentically. She went from a generalist HR role, and fast forward 7 years later, 7 short years later, she became the first vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion for this organization, a position that didn't even exist before she had it.
Amazing. And that not probably only felt good for you, but like, holy crap, that probably felt great for her.
She is a walking, talking testament of what's possible. And it didn't, even though 7 years is a long but short time, she started seeing, I would say, peaks and evidence of how this was working within a couple weeks of doing this process. And so I look at her as my example of what does it really mean to own your swag, and what are the results when you really lean into it.
Yeah. And so off of that, I'm going to take us back to even you for a second. So when did you notice that you were owning yours? Because I feel like when it comes to confidence and everything, we have our ups and downs, right? When it comes to all of these things. And so like, yeah, for you, when did that click for you?
Well, I can tell you when it started, when I realized I wasn't owning my swag. So I was in a corporate role, and I was a leadership development trainer for a utility here in the good old Mitten. For legal reasons, I can't mention the name of this place, but their competitor, their initials are DT&E. I'll let that one sit. Lisa will totally get that. If you're not from Michigan, doesn't make it. But anyway, and so I had this job that I loved, but it was something missing. And I remember walking into my boss's office and asking for a promotion. And I thought it was one of those conversations, Lisa, that would be just like obligatory. Like we were just kind of going through the motions because he was going to give me the answer that I needed to move to that next level. And I walked in his office, and for the purposes of the story, we'll call him Bill. That's because that's his name. And so as I walked into Bill's office and I said, I'm ready for this promotion. You know, I've been working here and here and here. And he said, oh, Mimi, honey, you're not ready. You're too much. You need to tone it down a little bit if you want to work here. And when I tell you that the wind came out of my cell in that moment, like it took like a balloon had just been burst. I was just kind of like, what? He said, go back, keep doing your dog and pony show as our leadership trainer. And then, you know, we'll think about this in another few years. I know what's going on here. I've worked here over 30 years. And I went back to I was devastated, and I went in my car and I called my mentor, and I said, how do I be less of me? Like I was really trying to figure out how to fit into this world. And she said, she's like, you don't be less of you. I want you to be more of you, because that's probably not the right environment for you. And at that point, I had just started speaking and got the bug. And it was interesting because the same messaging that I was telling everybody else, I wasn't following myself. And it took Chris to remind me, Chris Clark Epstein was my mentor, to remind me of who I was and how to take ownership of that. And just 3 short months later, I quit that job and I went full time into speaking, because I didn't want other people and other women specifically to have the same experience that I did.
Amazing. Congratulations on believing in yourself, first off. But like, man, what a crappy feeling, right? Like what a feeling to feel that someone tried to, in a way, take away from what your own identity was, but how powerful it is to get to that next level. And so like through that process, those 3 months probably were very much like, I'm going to say like a little like body shakes, a little bit of heart racing. And so as you're trying to like own that, there's still those doubts that probably come up, right? So take us through that step of like, how did you go from like, okay, I know I need to own this. I'm telling everybody else to own it. Now I'm owning it. So what did you do to get through those self-doubt moments?
And they came up a lot, and they still come up. You still have moments where you go, oh crap, did I really do this? Or how did I get myself here? And it's a couple things that's helpful. It's cultivating the right support and network around you to remind you who you are. So Chris, interestingly enough, is one of the pivotal, I would say, mentors in my life. And I would talk to Chris every couple weeks, and she would just continue to pour into me. And I used her as my litmus test for, am I making the right choices and decisions? So when I got ready to jump off the ledge, she would be there and say, okay, it's you've done the work, it's time. But to fully answer your question, one is to get clarity on your why. Like, why is it that you want to do this? What evidence do you have? Because part of building confidence is realizing and understanding that it takes a risk, and that it can also be a calculated risk. Most people don't know. Like when I say I quit my job three months later, I had been working on that for 3 or 4 years prior to that, and had to get the catalyst or the moment to hit the switch to say yes. And so that was Chris to remind me, Mimi, you've done the work up to this point. Now it's time for you to take that short leap, because it wasn't a huge leap. And I started putting things into place to make me successful. As a part of that, I would also say, who is in your network? So Chris was in my network. She reminded me, but I also had people who were doing what I was doing, what I aspired to do full time. And that made a difference. And so I remember going to my friend Shireen's house. Shireen is a professional speaker, and she had been a professor for a major university here for CMU. And she had taken the leap. She wasn't married. She didn't have like a safety net. And so I said, well, Shireen, how'd you do it? And she walked me through it. And one of the activities she took me through, which I think is so pivotal when you're looking to make that jump or that leap, is the process of visualization. And she asked me, she said, Mimi, if you could paint the best picture of what that next step looks like, what would it be? And so we sat in the middle of Lake Isabella, dreaming and visualizing that step. And I told her at that moment that I knew I wanted to quit. What would that take? I said, well, I need to have an in-between job, something that would give me enough money coming in, that would give me the ability to still pay my bills and feed myself and put a roof over my head, but also the flexibility to grow this business. And she said, what would that look like? And before I knew it, Lisa, the words out of my mouth were, it would be cool to get like a part-time training gig. Like I knew I could do that. I've had skills in that before. So fast forward a week, fast forward a week later, I go to my National Speakers Association meeting. And at this point, I had just been getting immersed in it. And I meet this woman who they said, hey, the chapter admin said, you need to know who she is. She might have an opportunity that you can help her with. I walk over to her and she says, I'm looking for this position. She hands me the piece of paper, and at the top it says lead contract trainer. A week later, the same thing I had visualized with Shireen just a week earlier. And she said, as I was reading through it, she said, do you know of anyone where this would be an opportunity for them? I said, me. She said, well, don't you have a full-time job? I said, don't worry about that. And that was the jumping off point that then allowed me to quit my job. And so I'll say there are moments that when you're fully owning your swag, I feel like the universe aligns for you. And because I was looking for it, because I was seeking it out, because I understood my why and had vision for it, made all the difference in the world.
Fascinating. And it's actually interesting because I think if you go out and you read leadership books and you follow podcasts, like you hear that advice, but the difference is maybe you actually did it. Right? I think that's the one thing that I hear all the time is like, you can get the advice, you can hear, you could have heard from your mentor even too, like they told you to own your swag. You could have said, yeah, but I like my job. I'm gonna start to play small. But the difference is the action that you put into place with that, which I think is so powerful. And I think it's something that a lot of people miss those opportunities. And I get it. It's scary. It's uncomfortable, and it's a risk.
It absolutely is a risk, but if there's no risk, there's no reward. And with confidence over time, one of my favorite books, which I'm sure you've read, Lisa, is The Confidence Code.
Oh, yeah.
By Katie Kay and Claire Schiffman. And they get to the crux of really what does it take? And it's risk taking, right? It's stepping outside of that proverbial comfort zone, but it's doing it so often. And it's also taking a calculated risk. Like I tell people all the time who want to become speakers, you just don't go out there and throw a website up and next week you quit your job. It's what steps am I putting into place to make me successful, to mitigate that risk? It's still a risk because you could do all of the things and it still not work out, but at least you put the parameters in place and you follow the steps and the guidelines to be successful.
Yeah. And you made me think of a thing that we do in a lot of the programs at Lead, the nonprofit that I run. It's if I had more confidence, I would blank. And it opens up a whole new world of people to think about, if I had more confidence, what would I do? You know, and that's been so powerful for people to see of like, here's the 3 things I would do. And I always tell people, okay, you have 3, now circle 1. Because you can't do all 3 right now, right? You have to focus on 1, be consistent. Because over time, like you hear from everybody, the consistency. And it's the same thing when owning your swag, right? It's owning and being authentic to who you are. I remember, and you just made me think of something. I remember when I was told that I was too loud, had too much of an opinion, all of the things that I thought I was still downplaying in those meetings. And I remember a leader, I called him crying, just sobbing. And I was like, how am I ever going to make it in this industry if I can't be me? And he's like, you've built a whole brand on teaching people how to be them. The minute you decide to not be you, it diminishes all the work that you've done. And I remember that, and it still sticks to me to this day of reminding myself of owning my own swag of like, you're right. Like, I can't tell people to do it if I'm not doing it. But like, why do we do it? You know, why do we feel like we have to hide who we are?
Yeah, it's challenging. And one of the things that I often tell people when I walk them through the 3 steps to owning your swag, the first is to clarify your confidence and talk about where does confidence come from. But then I pivot the story and I'll ask, when was the last time you took inventory of what makes you great? And the room usually gets silent because we don't do that. What do we focus on? As one of my colleagues says, your growth edges, your jagged edges, the things that you, for lack of a better word, you suck at, right? Like, get focused on your weaknesses. But when you look at the research around strengths, specifically around the work that Donald Clifton has done with Strength Finders. He was one of the pioneers of the happiness psychology movement. He said, we typically ask the wrong question. Instead of asking what's wrong, why don't we ask what's right and lean into that? And so I had people take their swag inventory. And swag is an acronym for success. So what are your successes that you've had, your achievements? What are you really proud of? Because I don't think we ring the bell of that enough.
Yeah.
Then I talk about wisdom. So where have you gained your insight? And it's not just in education, like that's great, different degrees, but maybe it's things like a fraternity that you've been a part of, or a club, or leadership that you picked up at church. Or my favorite is, where have you failed and what have you learned from it? Because typically out of our failures come the greatest rewards and lessons that we have that we can actively share with other folks. Then there's activities that put you into flow. And this is an area that we typically undercut, because what I found is, have you ever had an activity or something you were doing that you lose track of time in? Whether it's writing or singing or poetry, or even being knee deep in a spreadsheet. Like I know some people that is their jam, and they know specifically that that's where they get their energy from. There's a lot of research around being in flow. There was even a book written about it. And then lastly are your gifts. And those are your natural talents that you have. And what the research says is we all have talents. And typically from the time that, as my grandmother would say, we were knee high to a bow-legged duck. So as children, by the way, I don't know where you get said bow-legged ducks, but I digress. But from the time that you were a child, that you cultivated into a strength. And for me, I often tell people one of my top 5 is communication. No surprise that I'm in front of people and that's where I get the bulk of my energy. But when I was 5 years old, I would have a TV show in my parents' living room. Now I had my microphone, which could be mistaken as a hairbrush, or my audience, which, they were my teddy bears and Barbies. But nonetheless, it was my first kind of foray into communication. And it's one of the reasons I believe that I get the pleasure and the honor to do the work I do now.
I love that. And we just did a podcast recently about the zones of genius and those types of zones. And you made me think about all of those things of like, when you are doing all of these things, you're taking inventory, you're thinking about your gifts, you're thinking about all of these things. It's so amazing. It's so amazing when you see people walking those things, but it's getting there, right? And then getting there and reminding yourself to push through the noise, pushing through the self-doubt. And so thinking about those things, when you think about, swag, and you think about people, being consistent and moving from different phases or putting that plan together. When you were through that, and you probably had moments of self-doubt like you shared, how'd you get through it? What were some tools that you put in place to really make sure that you didn't give up on yourself?
Yeah, so it's, and I know I said this earlier, it's going back to the community that you have of people who remind you of who you are. I have a fantastic mastermind, and we call ourselves the 7-Figure Sisters. And we've been together going on, our anniversary comes up this August of going on 8 years. And with these ladies, I have been excited, happy, cried, like all of the emotions. And when I have moments of doubt, they are the ones that I come back to, and we recheck back in. And we do 2 in-person, we would call like events a year, where we see each other eyeball to eyeball, but then we are on a call with each other every couple weeks. And what I encourage people to do in my programs is to get what I call a brag partner, like someone that you can share your high points with, and also those folks who will help you through your low points. And a brag partner is someone that you're comfortable enough sharing your wins. Because a lot of times, especially as women, we will dial those back. Oh, that was nothing. That was no big deal. It's kind of the self-doubt that we have in our heads. And if you have your brag partner, that person is not allowed to let you off the hook. So at the start of every one of the calls with my mastermind, we have wins. You have to give us at least one, whether it's personal or professional. And it's helpful. The other thing is hire a coach, hire someone who's trained in that respect, who can call you on the carpet. And so my coach, and I always believe when you're a coach, you should have a coach. So my coach even tells me about her coach tells her to do.
Yeah.
But she holds me to my highest good, and I do check-ins with her. So that community aspect is really key, so that people, remind you of who you are. And they also hold you to your highest good. So they will call you on the carpet. And then the other thing I would say is I'm a big fan of affirmations. So interestingly enough, one of the assignments from my coach this past week was developing affirmations for who I want to become. And so we had a conversation about who am I? And let me give you a little clue. It's not your title. It's not being a mom or a leader. It is I am kind, I am generous, I am witty, I'm funny. Like that comprises of those are the aspects that comprise of who you are, right? How are you showing up in the world? And then who do you want to become? And that might be a shift. Like, what are the things how do you want to show up in a way that serves the world in a greater purpose, but also serves you? And so out of that, we develop these affirmations, and affirmations, anything after I am, are the most powerful statements that you can have. And so I started creating these affirmations, and I put them around my house to remind me of who I am becoming.
I love that, especially because if anybody has listened to the podcast for all these years, know that is my jam. So the fact that, at where you are in your career, how far you've come, you're still doing those things as a reminder to everybody, it doesn't end, right? Like you're continuously evolving, you're continuously having to work on these things, but that is like the powerful piece of it. I work in some different organizations and different schools and with my coaching clients, and it doesn't matter your age. Those are such powerful statements and the work behind it. It's like when you can't think of something, that's powerful, right? It's powerful in itself when you can't even be like, I don't even know what I am.
Right. And when she asked me that, it stopped me dead in my tracks. And so that's the question I would give to all your listeners, Lisa, is who are you and who do you want to become? And sometimes, and we have different seasons in life, that may change. Like we have to ask ourselves that question. And so when my coach gave me that suggestion, or that homework assignment, I should say, it got me down this rabbit hole. Here's a really helpful tip. I am the biggest fan, and I attribute a lot of my success to the process of visualization, but specifically vision boards. And I pulled out a vision board that I made, and actually I'm looking at it. It's off to the side here. And everything on this vision board came to fruition for me with the exception of a couple of things. And it's my evidence of success, but I hadn't done them in a while. And so my coach reminded me, go back and do what made you successful. Go back and make that vision board. So here's the tip. This is when you get to use AI. So what I did is I took the statements that I developed around those affirmations, around who am I becoming in this moment. I got colorful with them, right? So I am this powerhouse speaker that speaks in front of 10,000 people and makes X amount of dollars every year. I live in this luxurious home that's right off the water. And so I got super descriptive because I encourage people with your affirmations, start putting all your senses in. Yeah. And so I threw that into ChatGPT, into the part of ChatGPT, I think it's called DALL-E or something like DALLE, which does imagery for you, create an image. And I put a picture of myself in the box, and I said, create an image that looks like me, and take this affirmation and turn it into an image. And I have some amazing images that I will now place on my next vision board, and then also pop them as a digital reminder, as the background on the screensaver on my computer, and also as a screensaver on my phone.
That is amazing. Well, how did we survive without ChatGPT all those years? For real.
Man, I don't even know. Because it was funny. I was telling my coach earlier, I said, I was doing old school, like grab the magazine.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Trying to find the right picture. And I always encourage people that when they make a vision board, it's so much more than the image. Even though our brain processes images 60,000 times faster than the written word, we still want to have a representation of it from an affirmation standpoint, because that's the words that we're telling ourselves. And so you couple the imagery with the words and the affirmation in the form of them written correctly, which is focused on what you do want versus what you don't want. It's powerful. So now married that with AI, where I can literally see the affirmation in real time. And here's another quick tip. I love this. There's a book by an author. His name is Joseph C. Murphy, and it's called The Power of your subconscious mind. And what he says is your brain doesn't know the difference between what's already happened and what's actively happening. So when you create affirmations or vision boards, put them in past tense, like they already happened. Like one of my favorites, I'm looking at this board. I remember when I drove off the lot in my Cadillac SRX. I didn't own one yet, but every time I looked at it, I was visualizing myself. And fast forward a few years after I created this vision board, didn't drive it off in that Cadillac, but did get an Infiniti, which was just as good as the one that I put on.
I love that. Well, and one reference that I love to remind people when it comes to positive affirmations, positive mindset, is the guideline really is for every one negative thought you have about yourself, it takes 5 positive thoughts to overcome that negative thought. And so they share all the time, when you say that negative thought about yourself, you now have actually more energy you have to put in, because now you're like, okay, now I have to say 5 more things. Imagine if you would have just had that one. Right? One positive thing. And so that is just so powerful. So Mimi, just to kind of like close out for today, would you just kind of recap again for our audience what swag is and why is it important for them to really embrace that?
Absolutely, Lisa. So swag is the courage and confidence to unapologetically and authentically be who you are. And I really believe that not only you, but the world benefits when we own who we are, because we give permission for other people to do the same.
Awesome. Thank you, Mimi, so much for being on this podcast. Information to connect with Mimi will be at the bottom of our show notes, so please check that out. Please connect with her on social media and just get to know her even more. She's a fascinating, beautiful, strong, empowering woman. So thank you so much for being on this. And to everybody listening in, continue to spread love and kindness to everybody that you meet, and have a great day. Thank you for tuning into the Confident Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow the Confident Podcast on Instagram and TikTok, and share it with those who might benefit. Also, if you are looking to work one-on-one with me, message and follow me on Instagram at Lisa Tarkington Official. Stay confident, stay inspired, and until next time, keep striving to be the best version of yourself. Take care.